Wow, you came back. That's amazing. Well, there's more awesomeness in store. So hey, what's this? Why, it's the letter W. What a great letter. Did you notice the odd colors? Of course you did. That's good that you noticed. That's part of literacy. You're reading enough to say what you don't like to read. What's this? Oh, alright, the letter W. You know that. After all, you are all honor students. Maybe we should make this a bit trickier for you. What's this? Oh yeah, we've seen this trick before. It's a picture of the letter W. Well, isn't that interesting? If there's a picture of the letter W, if a picture of the letter W means the letter W is just an image then, right? Or at least we can see the letter W as just an image. Well, then that means, by extension, words and even sentences are also sometimes just images. Take a moment to take in what this means. The first part of this presentation, hopefully, showed you that we can read images much like we read sentences on a page, and that there's a language to images. Well, now we've gone and turned it on its head. Now we can see that words can also be seen as images. This is a pretty significant thing to note because that means when we put a bunch of words on paper and we want other people to look at them, well, then maybe we should think of them as images and consider the language of the images of words. That's a wild idea. Perhaps one morning, or late one night, you have seen this number on a clock. Again, I'll try not to insult your intelligence, but this is the number 2. Or, well, this is a representation of the number 2, since the truly clever of you will realize that we can only show a symbol of the number 2 and not the number 2 itself. And even more specifically, this is only a representation of the number 2, one that typically shows up on digital clocks. Here it is again. This is how it looks in a lot of textbooks. Now, see, I bet your brains and eyes are already getting ahead of you. As a piece of text, this means exactly the same thing as the last slides, right? But we're not reading this as text. We honestly don't care what the textual meaning is. What we care about is what does this representation of the number 2 mean? Here's the evolution of the representation of this number. Its textual meaning has remained the same, but its visual meaning has changed. See how at one point in time it was actually 2 lines, which is much closer to representing the actual concept of 2. Quick story time. When I was in high school, I was in math class, but not at all paying attention to math, but rather paying attention to the math book. I didn't do very well that semester. So, staring at the representation of the numbers rather than their meaning, I noticed something rather odd. All of the 2's in my textbook had this little tail at the end. I didn't know anything about typography at the time, but I ran around the room excitedly showing all the students this oddity. And did I mention I didn't do well that semester? Here's another 2, but this one doesn't have a tail. As I grew older, I learned, as you may already have, that this little tail is called a serif. Have you ever heard of a font referred to as sans serif? Well, if a serif is a tail, and you know that sans means without, then it's not much of a leap to realize that sans serif means without a tail. This is 2 in a sans serif font. Now we'll start with some real-world examples. Here's a typo-ridden page I put together real quick. I just used the HTML defaults when building this. I didn't think about what font I was going to use because I was at the time illiterate about the language of textual images. This page looks very generic. Now look at this one. I think it looks a little sharper, but all I did was change the font from Times New Roman, which is a serif font, to a sans serif font. So this improvement is not amazing, but it's worth noting, and much more importantly, you need to be able to see it when you read text as an image. Love of iPad or no, most will acknowledge that Apple understands design. Look carefully around this page, or actually just look at the text, but look at the text as an image. Notice that here Apple uses a sans serif font. If you want to communicate something visually, it's a good idea to examine the works of other people who have communicated it really well. Now you can see that one thing Apple does to make their site look nice is to use a sans serif font. They do a lot of other things too. If you spend time thinking about it, if you spend time reading the images and visual layout of the page, you'll start to pick up on it. One thing that is really interesting is that the way text looks, the image of text, is about much more than just whether a page looks good or not. It turns out that the image of text can also add meaning to text. Here's a handout I made for a class I did. Let's go ahead and look at some of the ways this text conveys meaning solely through visual cues. First, look at the alignment of things. Things that mean something similar are aligned physically on the page. Topic headings are aligned with each other, and so are all the examples underneath. Now look at these. Even though they are under different headings, each of these circled items are examples, either example text or example projects, but they are all the same type of thing. Not only are they aligned to the same position, but they are also the same size, and they are also all italicized. As your eye scans the page, you can pick out all these examples without ever knowing what the words actually mean. Now here I have checked all the URLs on a page. Because the URLs can appear in different contexts, they aren't all aligned, but they all share the same font. You may not even have immediately recognized it, but your eyes did. All of the links on the page have the same font, so you can pick them out easily. The ISBNs also use a different font from anything else. And again, your eyes can scan the page and pick out ISBNs without the need to consciously read the text. So hopefully you can see now that if you consider the meaning of text as image, you can actually add an entirely new layer of meaning to the text you create. What's really amazing is that because the eyes and brain work together so well, nobody needs to actually think about what these things mean as you would when you read a sentence. It's just done automatically. For the final part of this presentation, I'm going to pull from some slides that were done by the quite awesome Lisa Kurt. They're all real-world examples and are a bit more complex than the previous ones. We won't spend too much time on them, but the idea is to get you started reading visual images in all sorts of everyday places. Lisa has a background in illustration and design, so she has categorized the different aspects of reading images a little more clearly than I have. But, and she will attest to this really isn't a science. All categorizations are simply tools to help you. There is no official version of how to read an image. The most important things are to look at what you're looking at and to think about what you're thinking about. Here we can look at the composition on the page, where things are located in proximity to other things. This is like the girl in the dollhouse from the first part. You probably have opinions about which of these images looks better and more understandable than the other. But go past just that realization and start to ask yourself why. We mentioned alignment earlier, and here's another example. One point I want to stress, there is not necessarily a correct answer to which of these is better. What you should be asking yourself is, what do these images say to me? And then start analyzing how they say it. Here we see where contrasting colors come into play. Notice how it's very difficult to read the information in the image on the right. Sometimes our opinions are not entirely subjective. One of these is objectively harder to read. But then again, maybe you have a reason to make something hard to read, to convey a certain point, which is fine. Just make sure you don't make something hard to read when you don't mean to. Colors let us do more than simply drain lakes. Color theory can be complex, but you know what you like and don't like, and what certain colors say to you. The key again is awareness. Why do some colors look crazy to you? Why do others look neat and clean? In the first part, we talked a lot about the meaning of images. So when you use an image to make a point, make sure the image says what you think you're saying. Just because a picture looks nice doesn't mean it says what you mean. I like the overall design of this page. Here we can see so many different features coming together: alignment, color, composition, and contrast. When you see images and layouts you think are nice, don't just pass them by and think, that looks cool. Stop and read them. Truly reading images is a process very similar to reading text. It takes time and concentration. Here is just one more image that looks interesting. You'll notice that this may have a different feel from the last one. It reminds me of a certain World War II propaganda poster feel. But that feel is part of the language of images. It's not just because it's actually a poster from that time. It's because the layout and the features of the image on the page express that meaning. There are very few words on this poster, and yet a lot of information and feeling is conveyed. It's not just the text that you're reading, it's also the images. So hopefully, now you have found enlightenment. Your eyes are open. Go out and read the visual world.